of Mice and Men, written by John Steinbeck. Presentation by April Campbell. John Steinbeck, 1902 to 1968. John Steinbeck was born and raised in Salinas, California in a middle-class family. He was one of 4 children and the only boy. Steinbeck graduated from Salinas High School and attended college at Stanford University from 1919 to 1925. He attended intermittently between working as a hired farm helper. He eventually left Stanford in 1925 before graduating. Steinbeck moved to New York City to pursue a writing career, but returned back to California when he was unable to get his writing published. Upon returning to California, he took a job as a groundskeeper at a resort in Lake Tahoe. This position allowed him to focus on his first novel, Cup of Gold, published in 1929. Steinbeck's writing career accelerated when he published Tortilla Flat in 1935. Tortilla Flat focused on the Mexican Americans living in the Central Valley. Like a majority of Steinbeck's work, Tortilla Flat was inspired by his time spent working with the migrant farmers. Steinbeck's work focused on the social injustice faced by the migrant farm workers and other forgotten people. He focused on the effects of the Great Depression and the prejudice faced by the migrant farmers. Steinbeck also emphasized the importance of brotherhood among the workers in order to survive their harsh realities. Steinbeck's novels were enthusiastically received by the public, and he even held spots on the New York Times bestseller list. Despite the sales of his novels, Steinbeck's work was often criticized for being simplistic, overly sympathetic, and at times inaccurate. Today, Steinbeck is revered as a historian of the Great Depression through the eyes of the destitute people. Steinbeck's most acclaimed novel, The Grapes of Wrath, was published in 1939. Steinbeck received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1962. Steinbeck worked as a wartime reporter and continued to publish novels. Other Steinbeck works included In Dubious Battle, published in 1936, Of Mice and Men, published in 1937, The Long Valley, published in 1938, East of Eden, published in 1952, The Winter of Discontent, published in 1961, and Travels with Charlie in 1962. Steinbeck died in New York City in 1968. Of Mice and Men was published in 1937. John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men addresses themes common to Steinbeck's work, including migrant farmers, the decline of the moral system in the United States, brotherhood, the inability to attain the American dream, and prejudice of minority groups. The story is set in the Salinas Valley, in the farmlands that Steinbeck once worked. The ranch is in the town of Soledad on the Salinas River. The time period of the novel is the 1930s. The novel follows 2 migrant farmers, Lenny and George, as they chase their version of the American dream. The 2 migrant workers dream of owning their own farm. The origin of the novel. Steinbeck originally set out to write a children's novel, which he would call Something That Happened. In 1936, he had completed the manuscript, but it was destroyed by his dog. Steinbeck had met a mentally disabled farm worker during his time working on a ranch. Steinbeck spoke of this individual as an inspiration for the character of Lenny. The real-life mentally disabled farm worker had killed a farm boss and was sent to a mental institution. Soledad, the location of the ranch, is Spanish for loneliness. This is symbolic of the loneliness that the workers all face. The title of the novel. The novel Of Mice and Men gets its name from the poem, To a Mouse, written by Robert Burns. The following stanza is found in To a Mouse. The best laid schemes of mice and men often go wrong, and leave us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. This describes that even the best plans can go completely wrong. It connects to the plan that George and Lenny had of purchasing a farm and owning their own plot of land. Like the poem foreshadows, no matter how well they made the plan, their plan will not succeed and only leave them with grief. The main characters. George Milton. George is a migrant farm worker that travels with his companion Lenny. George serves as a caretaker for Lenny. George often expresses that his life would be better without Lenny. However, he continues to ensure Lenny's safety and well-being. George dreams of one day owning his own farm. Lenny Small. Lenny is a developmentally disabled migrant farm worker that travels with George. He is very childlike and has a fascination with soft things. Although Lenny is mentally disabled, he is a superior worker to George due to his brute strength. George does not understand his own strength, and in combination with his attraction to soft things, it brings about tragedy. Lenny, likely more than George, believes that the two will accomplish their dream and one day own a farm. Other characters include Curly, the son of the farm owner who is jealous and mistrustful of his wife's actions. Curly's wife, a young unnamed woman married to Curly who often flirts with other men. Candy, an old worker who, fearing that he will soon be let go from the ranch, aspires to join Lenny and George in their aspiration to purchase a farm. Crooks, an African-American farm worker who experiences discrimination because of his race. Slim, the foreman of the farm, a strong leader. The plot. George and Lenny have taken a bus to a new farm to find work. Before the two arrive at the farm, George tells Lenny to let him do the talking. George knows that traveling with Lenny looks suspicious. If the owner of the ranch finds out Lenny is mentally disabled, they will not be hired. George tells the owner that Lenny is his cousin, and he had an accident as a child. The pair begin working and mingle with the other workers. Right away, George and Lenny meet Curly's wife as she comes into the barn flirting with them. George develops a relationship with Slim and reveals the truth about Lenny and their relationship. Learning of his desire for something soft, Slim gives Lenny a puppy. Candy learns about Lenny and George's plan to purchase a farm and offers to contribute his life savings if he can partner with them. Candy is older and has only one hand. He worries that he will soon be fired and left without work. The three agree to this partnership and promise to keep the plan a secret. One day, Lenny is in the barn with his puppy and accidentally kills the puppy with vigorous petting. Curly's wife finds Lenny and tries to comfort him by allowing him to touch her soft hair. Lenny gets overzealous with her hair and hurts her. When Curly's wife tries to cry out, Lenny breaks her neck in a panic. Lenny, knowing that he has done something bad, leaves the ranch and returns to the pond that the story begins. Curly and the other men take off to find Lenny, but George finds him first. Knowing that Lenny will be killed by Curly's men, George attempts to calm Lenny by telling him a story. George tells Lenny about the farm that they are going to buy and the rabbits that they will raise. George then shoots Lenny. George is trying to protect Lenny from being afraid when the other men come to kill him. The themes in Of Mice and Men. The American Dream. George and Lenny, like most migrant farmers, came to California in search of work. They planned to work hard, earn money, and eventually save enough money to purchase a piece of their own land. Similar to other migrant farmers, Lenny and George were met with adversity. The pair had been discriminated against and forced to leave town on account of Lenny's actions which he was unable to control due to his mental disability. When George and Lenny's dream came close to reality, Candy was going to finance the farm, disaster struck. This had been the pattern for many migrant farm workers. As soon as their lives appeared on track, something would derail them. For George and Lenny, their plan was destroyed again by Lenny's disability. Brotherhood and Humanity. Of Mice and Men reflects another theme that is characteristic of Steinbeck's work, the importance of brotherhood and humanity. Steinbeck uses the relationship of Lenny and George to demonstrate the importance of caring for those that need help. George dedicates his life to making sure that Lenny is cared for. George also demonstrates extreme commitment towards humanity when he sacrifices his own feelings and shoots Lenny. Shooting Lenny, his companion, was difficult for George. George knew that shooting Lenny, however difficult for him, was best for Lenny. Steinbeck repeatedly used his literature to demonstrate the importance of humanity and working together to survive the struggle that the migrant farm workers faced. Loneliness. Steinbeck emphasizes the loneliness of the characters to show how the life of a migrant farm worker could be lonesome. Migrant farmers generally traveled alone and never stayed in one place long enough to develop meaningful relationships. George and Lenny were an exception to this rule. Steinbeck uses Curly's wife to show loneliness. Although her husband appears obsessed over her, Curly's wife still seeks the attention of other men. Crooks experiences loneliness because he is discriminated against for being African American. He does not socialize with the other farmhands. Even George will experience loneliness now that Lenny has died. Of Mice and Men effectively demonstrates to the reader the harsh realities faced by the migrant farmers during the 1930s. Each character that Steinbeck develops shows the different methods of discrimination that existed. Mentally disabled, elderly, physically disabled, and African American discrimination were all demonstrated in the novel. The obvious loneliness faced by the farmers elicits the sympathy of the reader. The development of Lenny and George's relationship and then the tragic end works to emphasize the inevitable loneliness of the migrant farm worker's life. When Lenny dies, George's dream of owning their own farm also dies, the unattainable dream that was the reality for most migrant farm workers. By building the dream throughout the novel, Steinbeck accentuates the failure of the dream to the reader. Through George's caring compassion towards Lenny, Steinbeck demonstrates the importance of caring for others. Overall, the novel works to paint a vivid picture in the minds of the readers of the social inequality that plagued the migrant farm workers.